Good afternoon. I don't think I was really late, but okay. I got a bit flustered at the outset. I thought maybe I was perhaps late, but what we have is around 1.5 hours, I guess, till we close for the day. After, I think you have had a fairly big dose of security today, so we'd like to keep on time. And we have around 5 speakers, so I guess we could give each around 20 minutes and still have some time to spare. No, we won't. 15 minutes, I think we would give each speaker and still have some time to spare for the question and answers. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think I'll say anything because we do have a very heavy panel who can perhaps elaborate on the intricacies of what is happening in India. But just for a brief overview, unless Maruf has already said it, I'm not too aware about it. But let me say that as far as terrorism, insurgency, and crime is concerned, these are the aspects with which we are going to deal today. In the 60+ years of independence that we have had, over 65 years, we have lost more lives in insurgency and terrorism than in all our conventional wars, and the Kargil episode, which you perhaps have heard about in 1999, which was a kind of a lesser skirmish with Pakistan in that year. And the toll has been, according to my estimates, which I have done through a local portal which sort of tabulates these figures, it's been more in the realm of around 65,000 lives lost since 1994 till date. And if we were to go back further, because insurgency started in India almost since independence, it would be in the realm of around 100,000. That's my guesstimate. So this is the extent of the problem that we have faced, and in some areas we continue to face. There are 4 primary strands of insurgency and terrorism in India, which have existed since almost the 1950s. There is the strand of ethnic insurgencies in what we have in northeastern India, which today comprises of 8 states. Initially it was 7 states, today it is 8, I think, of the total 28 states that we have in our country, plus the additional union territories that we have. So this is a huge swath which is surrounded almost entirely by international borders and has only 2% of a landmass connection with India, which is one of the affected areas. And you have an ethnic diversity there which is mind-boggling, which very few people would be able to understand. It's almost akin to what you have in neighboring Myanmar, with which the ethnicities are connected. This is around 200 tribes, as many languages, more sub-tribes, and so on and so forth. So this is something which will be dealt with here by one of my colleagues. Then the second strand of violence, which started in the late 60s, is what we call left-wing extremism. And today it's called the Maoist violence. This again sort of affects a huge strand, a huge swath of territory from the reaches, mostly in central India, but right from the north going southwards towards the southern states of India like Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, although they are not that badly affected. It's mostly the northern and the central states which are affected. And today the problem centers around 7-8 states, 5-6 of which are rather more affected than the others. Then we have what I call jihadi terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir, which began in 1989, and then evolved into a kind of a proxy war. And subsequently, the jihadi terror was carried forward by these very organizations which were active in J&K, some of them, which were inspired from across the border, into the Indian hinterland. And we had an upsurge of urban violence resulting in the several attacks that we had in 2008, culminating with Mumbai. So that is one strand. And each of these strands from 1995, especially the first three, have taken a toll of almost 5,000 lives each from 1995 onwards. And, sorry, from 2005 onwards, 2005, 2012, almost 5,000 lives in these major strands. The jihadi terrorism beyond Jammu and Kashmir has not been that expensive. It's around under 1,000 lives lost. And today, the situation is much better. In fact, the improvement in the overall situation had begun sometime in 2002, almost coinciding with the war on terror in Afghanistan launched by the USA and NATO forces. And there has been a consistent decline thereafter, where in last year we have touched three-digit figures, which is quite unusual and very heartening, in the sense that we have just had 800 plus casualties on all the theaters. So things have definitely improved. A lot of the credit must go to people sitting here on the dais who have been actually combating the violence in the field. But having said that, I must say that there has been a decline. That is true. But there is absolutely no room for complacency at all. All the three major insurgencies that I talked about, including the jihadi terrorism which affected India across the length and width of India, all three are in a sense alive and kicking. They have faced their vicissitudes. The graph of violence has risen, the graph of violence has fallen. It's been more intense at one period of time, less intense at another period of time. Some of them, especially the Maoists, occasionally adopt the tactic of going into what we call strategic retreat, when they stop engaging the forces and strengthening their own, both the military sections as well as the overground activity. So that is a kind of a strategic recession which could be taking place. And not least, the infrastructure for terrorism, particularly cross-border terrorism, has not ceased. There are a lot of camps across the border in J&K, in the area which we call POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir, and there is a reservoir of terrorists, both foreign terrorists, which are there, who have been fighting the NATO forces thus far. They are there, and we do feel that the situation could become grave and could take a turn for the worse post-2014 after the US and NATO forces withdraw from Afghanistan. And so that is something that we have to keep an eye on, and it could be a back-to-the-future scenario as happened in 1989 after the Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan. We had this upsurge in proxy war inside our own area. So that is one of the things. Then across the board, we have tried to strengthen our capabilities, but there are still deficits, particularly at the grassroots level. And that is what I was discussing with my colleagues. We have a very top-heavy kind of security architecture, which is a centralized security architecture, which is rather heavy on the top with a lot of central forces. I'm not saying that they're not useful, they're extremely useful. But what we are now beginning to do, and which we need to do much more intensively, is to strengthen the ground level forces. That is, forces at the level of the police station, which must be empowered, must be equipped technologically through manpower, etc., so that they can tackle these kind of challenges, because they are always going to be the first responders before any specialized central force can come in, as you saw what happened in Mumbai. So it would be an error to assume that the statistical decline translates into permanent peace. And with that, I think I'll just close this brief overview and call upon my colleague, Mr. O.P. Singh, Additional Director General